नमस्कार आदरणीय अध्यक्ष महोदया, माननीय कुलपति प्रोफेसर नंदिनी साहू मैडम, हमारे विशिष्ट वक्तागण डॉक्टर भाग्यश्री एस वर्मा मैडम एवं डॉक्टर SM याहिया इब्राहिम सर, उपस्थित सभी विद्वज्जन, प्राध्यापक गण, विद्यार्थी, शोधार्थी, प्रिय प्रतिभागी, आप सभी का हिंदी विश्वविद्यालय पश्चिम बंगाल द्वारा आयोजित तुलनात्मक विश्व साहित्य विषयक इस महत्वपूर्ण वेबिनार में हार्दिक अभिनंदन एवं स्वागत है। आज के व्याख्यानों के माध्यम से हम तुलनात्मक साहित्य में शोध की नवीन दिशाओं के साथ साथ हिंदी और उर्दू कविता की सार्वजनिक अभिव्यक्ति, उसकी सांस्कृतिक ऊर्जा और कह सकते हैं कि सामाजिक चेतना के विविध रूपों से भी परिचित होंगे। अब मुझे अत्यंत हर्ष एवं गौरव के साथ हमारी अध्यक्ष महोदया माननीय कुलपति प्रोफेसर नंदिनी साहू जी का परिचय प्रस्तुत करने का सुअवसर प्राप्त हो रहा है। प्रोफेसर नंदिनी साहू जी एक प्रतिष्ठित शिक्षाविद, सुप्रसिद्ध कवयित्री, सृजनात्मक लेखिका, आलोचक, लोक साहित्य की विदुषी तथा भारतीय अंग्रेजी साहित्य की एक विशिष्ट एवं सशक्त हस्ताक्षर है। आप नई दिल्ली स्थित इंदिरा गांधी राष्ट्रीय मुक्त विश्वविद्यालय की विदेशी भाषा संकाय की पूर्व निदेशिका रह चुकी हैं और आपके नाम पर लगभग 23 मौलिक एवं संपादित कृतियां प्रकाशित हैं। आप स्नातक एवं स्नातकोत्तर दोनों स्तरों पर स्वर्ण पदक प्राप्त कर चुकी हैं और अंग्रेजी अध्ययन में आपके उत्कृष्ट योगदान के लिए आपको भारत के माननीय उपराष्ट्रपति द्वारा स्वर्ण पदक से सम्मानित भी किया गया है। आपको अनेक प्रतिष्ठित सम्मानों से विभूषित किया गया है, जिनमें 2024 का माइकल मधुसूदन अकादमी अवार्ड, 2025 का लाइफ टाइम अचीवमेंट अवार्ड, 2025 का टैगोर सम्मान और ऑनररी फेलोशिप तथा 2026 का एम्बेसडर ऑफ इटर्निटी अवार्ड, इंटरनेशनल अध्ययन, आलोचनात्मक सिद्धांत, लोक साहित्य एवं संस्कृति अध्ययन, भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा और तुलनात्मक विश्व साहित्य जैसे विविध एवं महत्वपूर्ण आयाम इसमें सम्मिलित हैं। अब मैं आदरपूर्वक हमारी इस गरिमामयी संगोष्ठी की अध्यक्ष महोदया माननीय कुलपति प्रोफेसर नंदिनी साहू जी से विनम्र निवेदन करती हूँ कि वे अपने उद्बोधन द्वारा इस कार्यक्रम का शुभारंभ करें और हमें अपने प्रेरणास्पद विचारों से अभिभूत करें। मैम कृपया।
सभी को नमस्कार। Thank you very much, Paromita, for inviting the scholars, the speakers, and I extend my warm welcome to Professor Yahiya Ibrahim and Dr. Bhagyashree Verma to become a part of this very important lecture series on comparative world literatures, which has created ripples in Indian academia till date. We introduced this lecture series last year in 2025. The first lecture was delivered in the month of February, so it's almost 1 year and a couple of months now. And the eminent scholars in most parts of the country, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, and also people from various other continents and countries have contributed, have spoken in this lecture series on varieties of subjects. The lecture series that we conceived last year was basically to address Indian languages and, of course, foreign languages in a comparative pedagogy. Languages that extend to literatures, to various literatures. There is nothing like Indian writing in English when it comes to cultural studies, folk literatures, or tribal and oral studies. So we thought, why not introduce a lecture series in Hindi university, kind of a university, which is basically, instituted by the government of India to address the issues vis-a-vis the languages and, of course, literatures. So we introduced this lecture series, and looking at the overwhelming response of the scholars across the disciplines and countries, we have continued it till date, and Dr. Paromita has been seamlessly coordinating it. with the support of our university staff like Aman and Kajori. And the lecture series has not looked back, and we have invited
Hello.
the best scholars, the best brains of the country.
Hello.
Now, coming to
Namaskar.
the speakers today, the two speakers today, I have very long
साक्षी
association with
में
Professor Yahiya,
Uh,
and yes, I think he's speaking. So I have a very, very long association with Professor Yahiya Ibrahim, who has been, editing a couple of important and interesting journals, uh, ISSN based journals, and he has published almost all the good scholars in the country. He has been helping the youngsters and, of course, seniors. He has published me more than once. My creative writing and my critical writing he has published, and he takes great care while publishing the articles and the creative writing. And he has been promoting people. I see the way he has been, conducting himself in the department where he belongs to. He encourages the young, and he has been promoting the youngsters in his own department, and he is quite a popular teacher and a researcher and a scholar himself. And today he is going to speak on a very important subject from Mushairas and Kavi Sammelans, the public performance of Urdu and Hindi poetry. What else can be a better topic for Hindi University than this, where Hindi and Urdu poetry are discussed in the midst of our faculty and our students. We have a department of Hindi in Hindi University, and the department is doing very well. The faculty members are well published. They are critically engaged in their own research work in their respective subject positions. And I think after this webinar, they are going to get a new perspective on Hindi and Urdu poetry, how they can create a comparative pedagogy. Even I would request you to add a little bit of Persian poetry as well if you want. And there are a few questions in my mind about the topic that you have given. I would request you to address those questions, if at all. If you want to, you can address those questions for the benefit of our faculty and our students. The first question that you may address, apart from your own research that you are presenting, how do the audience dynamics influence performative registers in Mushairas and Kavi Sammelans? Because when it comes to Mushairas and Kavi Sammelans, we tend to conclude that it's a part of our performative art form. How do we take those two comparative world literatures as a part of the syllabus design and research? That would be one question that is in my mind. As a learner, rather, I would like to learn that from you. And then another question is, in what ways have broadcast media altered the cultural politics of Urdu and Hindi poetic performances? So they come as they come as poetic performances, and then they slowly get into the cultural politics of a country and of the universities. How do we address those as a part of our teaching and research? Could be one question from me that you would like to address, if at all. And then another question I have: how do linguistic code switching practices? We do a lot of code switching and code mixing. Urdu is such a beautiful language. When we speak Hindi, if we know a word of Urdu, at least if I know a word of Urdu, I would definitely use it. I will drag it by here and use the word. So, how do linguistic code switching practices affect the reception of poetry in bilingual mushaira and sammelan spaces? And then, how do you take it to the classroom? So, these are a few questions that I have. You may like to address them, and I'm so looking forward to listening to you. Most welcome to Hindi University. We are so grateful that you accepted our invitation. Now, coming to Dr. Bhagyashree Verma, I met her in a literature festival, and I was quite influenced by the lectures she delivered, the kind of poetry and literature she has been writing. She is a very, very committed scholar. If you talk to her for 5 minutes, for 4 minutes, she will talk about research and her students. So she is that kind of a very committed creative writer and a scholar. She is completely dedicated to the cause of art and literature. And today she has taken up a very important subject, Dr. Verma. I'm so grateful to you that you will be talking about new trends of research in comparative literature. When it comes to research and research methodology in comparative literatures, I think most of our youngsters, our scholars, even senior people are a bit of confused. For example, they compare one Hindi poet with another Hindi poet and they call it comparative world literatures. It cannot be so. When it is comparative world literatures, it has to be a comparative comparison between countries and continents and literatures, and any text that qualifies to be a part of comparative world literature should have been at least translated to some other language. So people don't understand those pedagogic details, maybe because we don't have these subjects in our syllabus, in our curricula. In Hindi University, we are proposing to design, to launch a new department of comparative world literatures, where this will be one of the important papers, the research and the research methodology vis-a-vis comparative world literatures. And that is where your lecture is going to be useful for our students and our faculty indeed. And today, before you deliver a lecture, may I give you a couple of my own research questions which I would like you to address, apart from whatever you have prepared today. A couple of questions that I have been thinking vis-a-vis your topic is, how do transnational digital archives reshape comparative literary methodologies in the age of artificial intelligence? When everyone says that we can't, avoid AI anymore, though I hardly belong to that school of thought. I'm a very, very traditional person. I edit my writing manually with a pencil, but still, keeping the larger, view in my mind, I would like you. I would request you to address this, that the digital archives do they reshape comparative literary methodologies. Very recently, a very senior poet from the US, and Indian, of course, and she is settled in the US. She's very well established. She sent me an innocent question. She is 80 years old. And she writes that, Nandini, I use Grammarly kind of software. I put all my poetry into Grammarly to check those. Then later on, they come out as AI generated poetry. How do I go about it? So this is such an innocent question, that she writes her poetry by hand. She gets it typed by her typist. She hires one language editor to edit, and the editor puts it in the AI. And later on, her poetry comes out as AI generated poetry. So these kind of questions are there in the minds of many senior people. Though youngsters are handling AI very well, but I think we are not able to handle, maybe because we are not trained, we don't have that mindset. So probably you can address that. Another question that I would like you to address today is, what role does eco-criticism play in reframing classical comparative canons? See, if you look at Indian folkloristic, there is no, there is a very free flow of exchange of ideas between the Margi and the Deshi. Unlike the Western pedagogy, where the high and the low cultures are very distinctly clear, there is a dichotomy. Coming to Indian literature, in the making of contemporary Indian literature, Margi and Deshi, folk and classical, they have equally contributed. In this scenario, does eco-criticism play a role in reframing the classical comparative canons? How do we go green? We talk so much about green cultural studies, about ocean humanities. How do we take these things into the comparative pedagogy? That is one question. And the third question, because we belong to Hindi University, we have a department of translation studies. So can AI-assisted translation tools transform comparative readings across non-European languages? That is one question that you may like to address. You may even ignore these questions, but these were in my mind, so I thought in the introduction I can request the two eminent scholars to address this for the benefit of our students and faculty. Once again, I welcome both of you to Hindi University to be a part of our family, and of course to be a part of our important YouTube series. You can see what kind of eminent scholars have already spoken for us. You look at those YouTubes and you are becoming a part of those that YouTube series, and I'm so happy and proud. Thanks and namaskar.
मैडम, आपका हार्दिक आभार। आपके इस उद्बोधन ने आज के आयोजन को एक मानो सार्थक दिशा प्रदान की है। अब मैं हमारे आज के प्रथम विशिष्ट वक्ता का परिचय प्रस्तुत करना चाहूंगी। आज की प्रथम वक्ता डॉक्टर भाग्यश्री एस वर्मा मैडम एक प्रतिष्ठित विदुषी, अध्यापिका, सृजनात्मक लेखिका, अनुवादक और कुशल अकादमिक प्रशासक हैं। अंग्रेजी भाषा और साहित्य के क्षेत्र में आपको 3 दशकों से अधिक का समृद्ध अनुभव प्राप्त है। आपने SET, PGCTE और PhD की उपाधि स्वामी रमानंद तीर्थ मराठवाड़ा विश्वविद्यालय नांदेड़ से प्राप्त की। आपने 1994 में अपने अध्यापन कार्य की शुरुआत की और बाद में पीपल्स कॉलेज नांदेड़ के अंग्रेजी स्नातकोत्तर विभाग के अध्यक्ष के रूप में महत्वपूर्ण दायित्व निभाया। वर्ष 2008 से आप मुंबई विश्वविद्यालय के अंग्रेजी विभाग में एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर रीडर के रूप में कार्यरत हैं। अपने अध्यापन के साथ साथ कविता, चित्रकला, अनुवाद, समीक्षा और शोध के क्षेत्रों में भी उल्लेखनीय योगदान दिया है। आपकी कविताएं, कहानियां, अनुवाद और शोध लेख राष्ट्रीय एवं अंतर्राष्ट्रीय पत्र पत्रिकाओं में प्रकाशित हुए हैं। आपने एकाधिक एमफिल एवं पीएचडी शोधार्थियों का मार्गदर्शन भी कराया है। आपकी उल्लेखनीय कृतियों में विमेन्स ऑटोबायोग्राफी, विमेन एंड सेल्फ तथा अमृता प्रीतम लाइफ एज लिटरेचर विशेष रूप से उल्लेखनीय है। आपने मराठी साहित्य का अंग्रेजी में अनुवाद भी किया है। आपने सुप्रसिद्ध अभिनेत्री, कवयित्री दीप्ति नवल के साथ भाषा संपादक और साक्षात्कारों के रूप में कार्य भी किया है और वर्तमान में आप उनकी रचनाओं का अनुवाद कर रही हैं। आपने यूजीसी HRDC के रिफ्रेशर कोर्सेज का सफल समन्वय भी किया है, स्नातकोत्तर पाठ्यक्रमों के निर्माण में योगदान भी दिया है और खासकर मुंबई विश्वविद्यालय में MA इन ट्रांसलेशन स्टडीज कार्यक्रम की स्थापना में महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका निभाई है। आपके शोध और व्याख्यान के प्रमुख क्षेत्रों में भारतीय काव्य शास्त्र, तुलनात्मक साहित्य, अनुवाद, अध्ययन, जेंडर सिद्धांत, स्त्री लेखन, शोध पद्धति और सृजनात्मक लेखन शामिल हैं। आप फाउंडेशन फॉर स्टडीज इन लिटरेचर एंड इकोलॉजी की महाराष्ट्र सचिव हैं तथा मुंबई विश्वविद्यालय की शोध पत्रिका शोधावली की सह संपादक भी हैं। अब अधिक समय न लेते हुए मैं आदरपूर्वक डॉक्टर भाग्यश्री एस वर्मा मैडम से निवेदन करती हूँ कि वे अपना विद्वत्तापूर्ण व्याख्यान प्रस्तुत करें और हमें अपने गहन विचारों से समृद्ध करें। मैडम, मंच आपका है।
एक मिनट। हाँ, am I audible now? Yes, thank you. So a very, very big thank you, heartful thanks to Dr. Nandini Sahu for having me here with a very attentive audience and scholars like Dr. Yahiya sir. Happy to be with you, sir, and also eager to listen to you. And a big thank you to Paromita ji for giving a very nice introduction of me in a very, very pleasant Hindi. It is so nice to hear my own, introduction. परिचय हिंदी में सुन के बहुत खुशी हुई. So let us start the discussion now. I'm also thankful to Dr. Nandini for asking very, very pertinent, very important questions. And I hope I get some time to talk about these 3 areas. It's a very vast discussion. I have just tried to make it very compact in my limited way, whatever I know about comparative methodology and research in comparative literature. Paromita ji, I request you to remind me at the end to talk about these 3 questions: AI and digital archives, number 1, eco-greens, number 2, ecology and literature, and number 3 is about translation or translatology. And I'm happy that I know something of it, so maybe I'll be able to contribute in trying to find the answers of such questions. Now, I request Amanji to start my presentation so that I talk about the topic which we decided for the discussion today. New trends of research in comparative literature. I tell my students that comparative literature is not very limited discipline. We use comparative studies also as a synonymous phrase to comparative literature. So, as a researcher of literature and language, let us first distinguish and understand the difference. When we say comparative studies, we are going to interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary areas. But when we use the word, I'm only on the first slide right now, Amanji. So I'm just trying to define the word comparative literature in a minute. And when we use the word comparative literature, we are talking about literature of different countries, of different regions, of different languages, of different cultures. So literature becomes a discipline, but interdisciplinarity within the realm of literature gives birth to this huge area we study in research called comparative literature. But when we use a phrase comparative studies, we are including the studies like psychology, sociology, philosophy, mathematics, chemistry, what not, under the sky. So comparative studies is a huge, huge area, while comparative literature is a disciplined interdisciplinarity within comparative studies. With this brief clarity on the terminology, let us ask a first question, which is given on the slide of the presentation. If you look at the picture, you can see the globe. You can see an individual trying to understand the globe. You can see the photo of my favorite writers like Jean Rhys and Kamala Das. And I wanted to put the photo of Amrita Pritam there, but I don't know how narcissistic impulse came in. So ignore that one. And Jean Rhys is one of the writers who is my favorite because she talks about the Caribbean life on the West Indies. And Kamala Das, we have known, is a very, very popular writer. I'm going to refer to these writers, women writers being my area of interest. But before that, the question that we are asking is, do we learn language through literature or literature through language? Because when I said comparative literature, I include language. I don't include other disciplines because other disciplines we use in comparative studies, but in comparative literature, when we are talking about literature of region, of country, of nation, of different areas, we also include languages, multiple, innumerable languages on the globe. And we are all, in India specifically, we are all polyglots. Dr. Nandini ji is a professor of English, but she is the Vice-Chancellor of Hindi University, and she has such a nice, pleasant Hindi accent and pure Hindi that she speaks. Dr. Yahiya Ibrahim, we are going to listen to, is a master of Urdu language, as I believe. I listened to the questions from Dr. Nandini ji. And we are all in India know more than 2 languages minimum, because we have the mother tongue and we have the other tongue, and then we have the medium of education. So when I use a term comparative literature, I have already included minimum 3 languages. I don't call it bilingual, trilingual, but it is a multilingual disciplinarity. So interdisciplinarity of comparative literature in research also includes multiple languages. With this primary understanding, let us move on to the phrase which is placed on the right side column on the first slide. If you can see, classical conditioning and socio-cultural disorientation. These are 2 different grounds. Classical conditioning, because we have been in the habit of reading and studying classical masters. अगर हमें गजल लिखना है तो हम पढ़ते हैं कि गजल कैसे अभी तक लिखी गई. So we go back to classics. Whatever understanding we have, we go back to classics and learn from there. That is the resource we have. So we call it classical conditioning and socio-cultural disorientation. लेकिन अब हम गजल लिखेंगे तो हम मिर्जा गालिब, मीर तकी मीर, उनकी तरह तो गजल नहीं लिख पाएंगे शायद, क्योंकि वो क्लासिकल मास्टर्स थे. So what we shall do, we will follow the classical canons. We will be oriented by the classical conditioning in writing something. I'm talking about creative writing and also understanding the creative writing, but also socio-cultural disorientation, because the society has been changing, the culture has been changing, the language has been changing. We are in a flux. Change is a constant mode of life. that we live. And with AI, like Dr. Nandini ji mentioned, digital archives and AI, this constancy of change is rapid now. Every minute we are changing, every day we are changing. Something new is coming up. So many softwares are coming up. The question that was asked by the innocent old grand lady about the use of Grammarly, I liked that, because there are multiple formatting methods. Methodology has a combination of methods, and formatting methods are offered to us online for free, but we have to learn yet how to use them. So it is like fire. AI and digital world, online thing is also like a fire. How much we use of it, and how do we understand the methods, different methods of using it. So classical conditioning and socio-cultural disorientation is a contradiction that we are trapped in. It is something similar to what Matthew Arnold said: the old world is dead and the new world is yet to be born. Can we move on to the next, Amanji? So we are talking about the trends now, trends in recent literary discourse. If you look at the phrases, there is a confused researcher who is, scratching his head because he is thinking how many questions are there. And questions and questions and questions, because research begins with questions. And when you try to find the answers of the questions, you are a good researcher, because you have to ask question and then you have to try to find the answer. So along with these questions, this researcher is thinking about what kind of recent trends do we have in a literary discourse. When I say literary discourse, I'm again limiting myself to literature rather than to social sciences and other disciplinary studies. So if you look at the phrases on the right side on this slide: post-colonial literature, these are the names of the trends we already have, recent trends. So post-colonial is after the colonial times. If we go back to history, we have post-colonial literature. We have the upcoming writers who are actually talking about what happened in the colonial times. The next one is interdisciplinarity, which we define by the neighboring disciplines like mythology, like ethics, like philosophy, like ecology. Dr. Nandini ma'am has already mentioned ecology and eco-criticism, and this is quite relevant to my discussion here, because ecology cannot be separated to a researcher like me from literature. If you go to romantic poets, William Wordsworth is talking about rainbow and daffodils and river and mountains, and we have lot of nature in the writing. In fact, we are the product of nature. We are living in the lap of nature. How much we go away from nature, and Wordsworth needs to tell us and remind us, go back to nature. We are still pulled back to nature. Even if we are cutting the jungles so fast, we still have a money plant in the window of our small flat. So nature is not only inescapable, because we are living on the air, on the oxygen, on the water, all the elements of nature which are sources for us, which are life for us, but also ecology as a discipline quite adjacent to literature, which becomes a part of research in comparative world of literature. So we include interdisciplinarity with mythology, ethics, philosophy, ecology, geology. Geology as an important part, because area is important, regionality is important, the nation is important. If you are talking about Indian writers, you look at Indian culture. You're talking about African writers, you have to go back to African culture. Every language, every region, every nation is rooted in a sort of culture which has its own glory, its own past, and its own current trends. So we need to go deeper into that. That profound contextualization is very important. And then psychology, of course, because we cannot talk about biology, literature, sociology without psychology. Now, this is also another discipline, but psychology I'm talking about as a part of literature, as the part of inbuilt elements in literature by default. We cannot escape psychology. Go back again to romantic canons. You will find John Keats talking about negative capability. You will find Coleridge talking about the horror on the ocean. When he says water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. The fear, the passions, the love, revenge, hatred, all the emotions that literature has been expressing about. They are a part of psychology. We are all actually looking at literature as the part of product of psychology. If you look at the next point, revolutionary and marginalized literature, this is the upcoming trend now. If you want to research in comparative literature, in world literature, what are the trends? Recent trends include not only the other disciplines adjacent to literature, but also revolutionary literature, which we call literature of protest. In Mumbai University, recently we started a paper called Literature of Protest, and protest studies is also mentioned here, and marginalized literature. Marginalized because sometimes we cannot pay attention to all the things, and some of the things come in the mainstream, and something which is not a part of mainstream is referred as marginalized. So now we are paying attention to that, the literature of women, the literature of children, the literature of Dalit, the literature of the downtrodden people, the literature of the tribals, the literature of the Africans, the literature of the queer. Lot of literatures which we had not been paying attention so far. Now we are paying attention to that. So that is also, in a way, literature of resistance. And then we talk about film, literature, theater studies, and cultural studies. So these are also the interdisciplinary areas which are merging into literature. There is a novel on which the film is made. Sometimes there is a film on which the novel is written. Now the things are happening two-way, not only because of AI, but also prior to AI. We have such examples where people watch the stories in the film and they feel like they should write something similar. So not only literature gives birth to film and theater, but also the other way. And cultural studies is a huge area. The recent literary discourse cannot be researched without the inclusion of cultural studies. The next one, Amanji. Now, new scholastic trends. If we look at the picture, it's a funny picture I found, actually shared by my student, and I liked it so much. I liked to share it here. There are all the creatures, these pretty and petty creatures watching the chicken being baked in the microwave oven. It's like nature, what you say, murder of nature, and also the food prepared for the upcoming generation, and the use of technology as microwave. So everything symbolically presented in the picture, the picture is very vocal. It speaks about so many things. Now, if you look at the right side, the listed important points we are going to discuss. Literature of gendered minorities, as I mentioned, marginalized, women and queer. It continues here, writing of the resistance like tribal, subalterns, expatriates. This generation does not know what is expatriates. In my MA syllabus, I had the literature of expatriates, people who are exiled, who are sent away from the country because of some reason, whatever be the reason, personal or political, but they are not allowed to enter their native areas, their local areas, and that becomes a kind of exile. Right from Veer Savarkar to Taslima Nasreen, I can refer to a list of names who have suffered this kind of life, barred from their native origin, from their local areas, and they tried to live somewhere else. Taslima Nasreen is even now writing, very sharply about this. And also visual and graphic literature, children and children's literature. We have a huge part of visual and graphic literature, which is
Hello.
What is happening, Paromita?
Yes, ma'am. Aman,
यस मैम.
मैडम आउट हो गई हैं क्या?
हाँ शायद मैडम का नेटवर्क शायद नहीं है. इधर नेटवर्क ठीक है.
इधर तो ठीक ही है.
आ गई मैडम.
अच्छा.
Am I audible? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes, sorry for the disconnected moment. I'm just trying to continue now. So in the new scholastic trends, we have writings of resistance. We have all these tribals, expatriates, visual graphic literature. We have eco-criticism. See, ma'am has already mentioned it without even looking at what I'm going to talk about. So there is a universal, connectivity. It's not only collective consciousness, but also how we talk about the relevance of the things, how we create coherence in the research we are doing. This is a contemporary mind. People used to say all great minds think alike. I don't call myself great. Of course, Dr. Nandini is great. But let me tell you, all the friends now happily, that eco-criticism, as she referred, is the like-minded discipline of like-minded people, a very, very important area of relevance today in research. And digital humanities is also included as more important areas now because of the upcoming AI and other modes of formatting in the digital world, archives, and film studies and media and pop literature, cultural studies. Happy I can share that in Mumbai colleges, we also have a lot of options. If you go to Somaya College, the colleges which are affiliated to our university, Sophia, Somaya, Mithibai, Bandra National College, all these people are offering pop culture and literature as a kind of study which is a part of comparative literature, as I believe. There are film studies, media and cultural studies, English language pedagogy, pragmatics is a very, very important discipline, and sociolinguistics and regional literature. Example, I've written Goan because one of my researcher in MPhil is now interested, she was doing MPhil earlier. Now she wants to do PhD. So she's now interested in doing something in the Goan literature, literature from Goa. And the regional soil speaks for the larger culture. Always we find the elements of universality also in the native soil. So that is something. Amanji, can we move on to next? Something which is very, very important. If you look at new trends in literary research, I have another phrase. I have just listed the phrases here because I want the students, the upcoming researchers, to be acquainted with the different terminology and then work on that according to their interest. And they can work on various topics of research relating to these areas. So bilingualism, as I earlier said, bilingualism is a smaller part where we have only two languages, but because we are Indians, knowing more than two languages, we have trilingualism, we have multilingualism, we have multiculturalism, all the things which are available to us in the options of research. Translation studies is one important area. Let me tell you, translation has become an industry now. There is so much lucrative offer. Times of India, any press in India, you go to media and communications, you can go to telecommunications, you find job opportunities, booming. Like if you have the knowledge of more than 2-3 languages and you can do translation. Now, everybody has the knowledge of multiple languages, but everybody has not tried to do translation. Because doing translation like a Google or like an innocent person naively doing it is actually the raw attempt. But if you go to the formatting and the science of translation, which is now developed as translatology, lot of theories are coming up. There are already multiple theories that are there. Susan Bassnett, Remark, Lawrence Venuti, many people have contributed. And if you look at translation as a method, translation as a skill, translation as an art, translation as a format, there is so much scope. And this is how we developed the course of MA in Translation Studies in Mumbai University, and we proposed that. And I hope we will get the grant soon for it. We have not yet started it, but I really dream of starting that course for the people of younger generation, and especially for those who know many languages. If you know many languages, you should use all those languages and you can use them fruitfully in translation. We have multilingual, multicultural studies, cross-cultural context, language in revival. See, languages are in revival because we are using one language in multiple formats. Now, mobile language is different. Messaging language is different. The language of Instagram is different. The language of Facebook also is, and we already know that cinema or film industry has its own language. So languages are reviving in a very, very fluid formatting in multiple areas, registers, as ma'am mentioned, and cinema studies, animation, motion picture, parallel cinema, documentary films, short films. These are the new trends. In my university, in my classes, MA students are also doing their research projects on short films. It is such an interesting area. You can just pick up a couple of films which are short films and talk about the thematic similarity or the thematic difference, a kind of comparison by the method called parallelism. Yes, so we have already, Amanji, thank you so much. You have shown the next slide. I'm happy the light also is back, and I was worried about the electricity, but now I'm happy. So let us just continue. Trends in language research, you can see school education, higher studies, and MMM. I have mentioned MMM as mass media motives. This is a very latest trend in language research. Here specifically I'm mentioning about what are the possibilities for language for the new researchers. You can work not only how the school education is done in multiple areas, comparatively you can work on that, but also higher studies and mass media motives. Mass media is a huge area which includes all the things. Language as socio-cultural phenomenon, of course, we have socio-linguistics, ESP, business, corporate communication, CS, communication skills, soft skills, which are a part of very important, part of personality. When you go for the interview, the younger generation people, when they will go for the interview, what is tested? The language, the expression, the accent, the soft skills. Aporia and closure. Aporia is actually the mention of how we process truth and meaning and perception. How do you understand? When somebody says the moon or the rainbow, how do you visualize that? The meaning comes to your mind. This is not only Ferdinand de Saussure and deconstruction of Derrida, but also a lot of semantic perception of language. So there are multiple theories. And failure, the last point on this slide is failure or gap or channels of communication, which are changing so fast now. Now here I can refer to the question that Dr. Nandini mentioned when the 85-year-old lady asked, what do I do? If AI is changing my poem, I just wanted a grammar help, and it is changing and reproducing it as AI generated poem. So the way we give instruction to AI is very important part of it. When you put a Grammarly or Urkund or any software, you are checking plagiarism. Are you checking language? Are you checking adverbs and structure of lines? Are you checking the stanza formatting? If you go to the deeper and profound elemental foundation and then give an instruction to the AI is a very intelligent assistant. It is like a genie of Aladdin. You have to be clear in your instruction. आप अलादीन के जीनी को कहिए मुझे खाना चाहिए, वो पूरी दुनिया का खाना लाके देगा, लेकिन आप उनको स्पेसिफिकली बताइए मुझे चाइनीज खाना चाहिए इंडियन फ्लेवर में, मोमोज मत लाना, मुझे प्याज नहीं चलता, मुझे तीखा नहीं चलता, मुझे फीका चाहिए बट मुझे चटपटा चाहिए. आई एम गिविंग अ वेरी डोमेस्टिक एग्जांपल. You have to give a detailed instruction. What do you want from AI? Even in a small Photoshoppy edit, if you go to ChatGPT, Gemini, Notebook LM, whichever formatting you are using, you are preparing a video or a slide, you have to specify. If you do not specify, what do the Aladdin's genie will do? AI is just like that. It will give you an ocean. You have to show the ocean your container. You want only this much, and specific instructions will help you. So this is very important. Not only a part of the whole answer, but I'm just trying to contribute to how to find the answers of such questions. Can we move on, Amanji? Yes. Revival of trends now for the next slide. If you look at, yes, that is Adrienne Rich, the quote from her. When we look at reviving trends from past to present, there are some trends which never die. They revive, they come back, and they are useful because canonical learning also becomes a modern learning sometimes. And how does it shape itself in the different formats in the contemporary times? If you look at Adrienne Rich, she is saying a simple thing. Look at the quote. She says, I keep coming back to you in my head, but you could not know that, and I have no carbons. I keep coming back to you in my head. So this is very amalgamated gender interaction she's talking about. And the same thing I'm applying to past and present. Classicism, neoclassicism, romanticism, modernism, up to realism. These are the canonical trends we have. in the 20th century onwards, we have the modern trends, which are feminism, Marxism, structuralism, postmodernism, post-structuralism, even later, World War period. If you look at Dadaism, Imagism, Symbolism, Naturalism, Surrealism, Irrealism, all isms give you a typical way, typical formatting, typical method of understanding an ism. Every ism is a trend. And research is important if you take support of the foundation of theoretical ism. These are not only criticism branches, but they are also theories for us. So some conceptualization, some concepts and theories you need for grounding your thesis. And that is how we create the revival of trends. Can we move on, Amanji? I'm just trying to take care of my time. So I'm slightly moving faster. If you have any questions, please come back to me in chat box. Upcoming trends in world literature. If you look at different, now also the picture here, this mouse is using human being like a mouse. This is not the revenge of nature, but this is a reversal. We sow the seed and we reap the fruits. AI is coming back to us, but AI is not a monster. It is human intelligence already. Lot of feeding is done in the world of digital archives, and that is coming back to us. So who prepared AI? Only human brain. And this is a kind of, not only, I would say Frankenstein, not only I would say Bhasmasur, but the kind of genie we have produced. Our own child. AI is a child of human brain. And if the child, when Wordsworth said child is the father of man, if the child grows up, the father is afraid. Now, how to handle this child? So the same situation has come back to us. We have upcoming trends now in world literature. Touchstone writers, if you go back to the touchstone method of 19th century, Matthew Arnold, late 19th century Victorian times, he was talking about touchstone writers. You can pick up one writer and follow that style. Dr. Yahiya ji will probably clarify more on this. In Mushaira, when we use the Shero Shairi, people tell us कि ये मैंने मिर्जा गालिब की जमीन पर लिखा है, ये शेर मैंने फैज की जमीन पर लिखा है. तो किसी की जमीन पर लिखना, what is that? Probably Dr. Yahiya will clarify that. How do we follow the touchstone writers, the canonical masters as our models? Neo-humanism, Reconstructionism. Reconstructionism is very important. It has become adaptation, adoption. If you look at Vishal Bharadwaj producing the movie like Onkara, Haidar Makbul on Shakespearean text, that is Reconstructionism, becoming a film industry trend. Inversion, subversion, assertion of the past. When we reconstruct, we are not only inverting, we are not only reverting, subverting, but also asserting the past. We cannot escape that because the masters are haunting our mind. Displacement sagas are there. Connotative, collective shades are there. Canons and myths, they are so important for us as our source. Decolonizing and nativism. This last one is my favorite area. Decolonizing, because we are so carried away by the Western trends, we forget the native roots. Now we are coming back to the native roots, and we are trying to connect with our own culture. That is nativism. Bhalchandra Nemade has written beautiful essays on that. You must read. If the interesting part is, if the researchers are interested in the work by Nemade, you can actually use Nemade's essays as the grounding of nativism. Current trends in next, please. Amanji? Yes. So current trends in comparative literature, you will look at comparative aesthetics. And comparative aesthetics tells you about not only human understanding, which is a basic understanding. We begin from tabula rasa, the primary understanding, A, B, C, and restart and nurture. And then theatrical, fictional, right from rasa theory of Indian aesthetics, we connect back to classics once again. Othering of the mother tongue. As I said, language and culture is also changing. The mother tongue is changing so much. You talk to Gujarati, Sindhi, I am Marwari. Marwari children now, they are speaking in English Marwari. I should say Anglophile Marwari. So there are languages which are interacting with each other. And that is like othering of the mother tongue. Theory versus practice. We have a dichotomy always going on. Theory and practice are moving on parallel way. But this is an area of researching how much theory you follow in practice and how much practice is actually giving birth to new theory. Reading and reception, we have reader response theory, we have reception theories. Feminist, I'm coming back to feminist again and again, women writers being my area of interest. And theoretical perspectives, of course, theoretical perspectives on feminism itself. Feminism itself has a huge history. Yes, okay, Paromita ji. So I'm just coming back to next slide, Amanji. Future trends, further trends. I skip that. You can read the questions. They are just general questions about how the researcher has to begin with the questions. And the next one, Amanji, where we are talking about future trends. The next one, future trends for PhD research. Research is really in PT. I'm coming to the last slide, Amanji, the next one. Genre inquiry, yes, this one. And intersectional and interdisciplinary research, infography, hypertext, and creative and critical thinking. I'm sorry if I have taken a few minutes more, but just allow me to thank Dr. Nandini ji and Dr. Yahiya ji for being present in this discussion. I'm so happy you are here, sir. And Dr. Nandini ma'am and Paromita ji, thank you so much. All the audience, I'm thankful to you for having me here. Please share my number from Paromita ji and email, and you can connect with me anytime, anywhere. Thank you.
थैंक यू मैम। आपके इस अत्यंत ज्ञानवर्धक और विचारोत्तेजक और कह सकते हैं कि प्रेरणादायी व्याख्यान के लिए हार्दिक आभार। आपके वक्तव्य ने इस तुलनात्मक साहित्य अनुवाद अध्ययन के विविध आयामों को अत्यंत प्रभावशाली ढंग से आपने हमारे सामने रखा है। अब मैं हमारे आज के द्वितीय विशिष्ट वक्ता डॉक्टर एस.एम. याहिया इब्राहिम सर का परिचय प्रस्तुत करना चाहूंगी। डॉक्टर एस.एम. याहिया इब्राहिम सर वर्तमान में करीम सिटी कॉलेज जमशेदपुर झारखंड से अंग्रेजी स्नातकोत्तर विभाग के अध्यक्ष के रूप में कार्यरत हैं। आपने अमेरिकी नाट्य विषय पर पीएचडी की उपाधि प्राप्त की है। आपका विशेष अध्ययन क्षेत्र अमेरिकी साहित्य और भारतीय अंग्रेजी लेखन है। इसके साथ ही साहित्यिक इतिहास, साहित्यिक सिद्धांत एवं आलोचना, फिल्म अध्ययन, संस्कृति अध्ययन, अनुवाद और खासकर उर्दू साहित्य में भी आपकी गहरी रुचि है। आप दास लिटरेरिस्ट नामक अंग्रेजी सृजनात्मक लेखन और साहित्य अध्ययन की अर्धवार्षिक, समीक्षित तथा अंतर्राष्ट्रीय पत्रिका के मुख्य संपादक हैं। आप हिंदी और उर्दू में कहानियां लिखते हैं, अंग्रेजी में कविताएं रचते हैं तथा उर्दू, हिंदी और अंग्रेजी के बीच अनुवाद कार्य भी करते हैं। इस प्रकार आपका लेखन और चिंतन बहुभाषिक, बहुसांस्कृतिक और तुलनात्मक दृष्टि से अत्यंत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। अब मैं आदरपूर्वक डॉक्टर एस.एम. याहिया इब्राहिम सर से निवेदन करती हूँ कि वे अपना व्याख्यान प्रस्तुत करें और हमें अपने विचारों से लाभान्वित करें। सर कृपया आप मंच।
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Paromita ji, audible? Am I audible? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Highly indebted for such a nice introduction, I would like to say. But our introduction is simply being teachers. So that is a great introduction for a teacher. That if he is being introduced as a teacher, that is enough for all of us. I hope Nandini ma'am, Bhagyashree ma'am will agree with me. So let us begin because we have not much time left. Namaste, Adab, and a good morning to everyone present here. Academics, students, researchers, and friends of literary and cultural studies. First of all, I'm grateful to the University, the Hindi University, Kolkata, especially the Honorable Vice-Chancellor Nandini Sahu ma'am, for being such a great mentor of research and creativity in the field of academics. I'm also thankful to Paromita Das the convener of Comparative World Literature, for being in touch with me constantly, and for providing this opportunity to interact with this highly learned gathering. And I congratulate and I must highly appreciate the great paper, the great thoughts shared by Dr. Bhagyashree ma'am. It was so nice. It was so nice. I was basically thinking of requesting you to talk to our students also, because they are also doing some comparative things in their masters. It was really a great lecture, ma'am. Thank you so much once again, all the organizers. So let us go to the topic for today. It is from Mushairas and Kavi Sammelans to the streets, the public performances of Urdu and Hindi poetry. I begin with a premise that poetry is both a repository of aesthetic tradition and also a spiritus mundi of public feelings. My central argument is that the migration of Urdu and Hindi poetry from institutionalized literary gatherings like Mushairas and Kavi Sammelans into the terrain of public performance is not merely a change of venue. It is a transformation in function, semiotics, and political capacity. This movement recalibrates the poetic utterance from aesthetic object to social instrument, complicating conventional boundaries between literature, orality, and public performances. When I talk about theorizing, I situate my analysis on three theoretical frames, that is performance, orality, and the public sphere. Drawing on Richard Schechner and Irving Goffman, performative poetry is an enacted speech act. The Mushairas and Kavi Sammelans are performance ecosystems, state, mise en scene, and audience co-produce meaning. The poet's voice is a technology that constructs effective states. Following Walter Ong and Jan Vansina's orality and memory studies theories, the oral transmissions mnemonic devices like refrain, meter, felicitate repeatability. Oral poems are compressible, portable units of cultural knowledge. They map well onto the sloganic structures. As far as public spheres and counterpublics are concerned, building on Habermas and later scholars of counterpublics like Fraser and Warner, poetic gatherings create discursive publics. When poets act as public intellectuals, they translate literary discourses into civic language. Public spaces, in turn, are emergent spheres where poetry functions both to contest dominant narratives and to assemble counter-hegemonic solidarities. Combining these frames helps explain why poetry is especially suited to political performances. It is performative, orally memorable, and geared towards public formation. Let us now talk about a sound, not a word, but a sound that has haunted the collective memory of the Indian subcontinent for centuries. It is the sound of a spontaneous, drawn-out wah wah, rippling through a lamp-lit hall as a share lands perfectly from the poet's mouth to the ear of the audience. And now let us juxtapose that with another sound, the stark rhythmic chant of any poem by Faiz, rising not from a velvet, or Nagarjuna also, rising not from a velvet divan, but from a dusty street, amplified by a crackling public address system, a sea of hands raised in solidarity. This humble talk delves into the liminal space where aesthetics meet action. Today, we are not just tracing a literary history of Urdu and Hindi poetry. We are mapping a journey of performance, a journey from the refined, intimate courtyards of the Mushairas and the Kavi Sammelans and the cultural arena of the Kavi Sammelans to the poetic, charged, and profoundly democratic stage. The core question guiding our next 20 minutes is this: when a poem leaves the page and enters the world, how does its relationship with its audience fundamentally transform it? And what happens when the purpose of that performance shifts from aesthetic delight, that is maza in Hindi we call it, aesthetic delight, to social solidarity events. Now let us look at the anatomy of the traditional stage. This stage is the sanctified space of adab, andaz, and the patron's shadow. Eminent poets sitting cross-legged on a stage. To understand the revolution, we must understand the throne room. Our journey begins with two distinct yet occasionally overlapping class performance ecosystems. First, let me talk about Mushaira, which is I see as an aesthetic republic of wit. The word Mushaira comes from the Arabic shair, meaning poet. It was at its heart a congregation of poets. Picture the 18th century Delhi or Mir Taqi Mir or the courtly splendor of the last Nawab of Awadh, Wajid Ali Shah. The Mushahara was not just an event. It was the heart of the city's cultural life. Its physical architecture was hierarchical. Candle or a shama would be placed before the presiding poet, and then it moves from one poet to another as the Mushahara surges with the night. The audience sat according to a fine-grained social order. But here's the paradox. The performance was profoundly democratic in its reception. There was no polite applause. The audience was crucible. A masterfully crafted sher was met with a thunderous wah-wah and a request to repeat it, mukarrar. A clumsy metaphor or a faulty meter was met with a chilling silence or a worse polite collective murmur. The poet didn't just read, he performed with a specific andaz, a lyrical intonation that drew out every nuance. It was a high-risk, high-reward game of cultural capital where a poet's ustadi, that is mastery, was forged in the fires of immediate public approval. Now let us cross the linguistic L to the Kavi Sammelans. If the Mushahara was the art of intimate, suggestive ishara, the Kavi Sammelan, which flourished in the Hindi heartland, was a grander, more explicitly heroic stage. Its modern pan-Indian form was largely shaped by the nationalist fervor of the early 20th century. Think of the legendary Kavi Sammelans of the freedom struggle, headlined by titans like Maithili Sharan Gupta and Subhadra Kumari Chauhan. The performance grammar here was different. It was less about the intricate, multi-layered shape and more about the recitation of longer narratives or oratorical poems with a strong rhythmic cadence and a clear moral or patriotic message. The poet was a kavi, a seer, a guardian of civilization who spoke directly to the collective soul of the people. The audience's response was not the intimate wah, but often a collective swelling of pride, a synchronized nodding of heads, and thunderous applause with a powerful Taj Mahal or Jhansi Ki Rani poem being recited there. Crucially, both these spaces, the Mushahara and the Kavi Sammelans, despite their differences, were governed by a shared foundational principle, the adab of the mahfil, that is, the decorum of the gathering. There was an unspoken contract. The audience's role was maza, savoring. The poet's role was the perfection of shairi or kavita as art. The immediate political reality might seep in through metaphor and allegory, but the primary frame was literary excellence, not political mobilization. Now let us look at the poetic text as tool versus artifact. Rewriting the two. This two is very famous in Urdu poetry. So this rewriting the two and changing the mehboob into a zalim, where two becomes the tyrant. The key figures here can be Kafi Azmi, Sahib Ludhianvi, Nagarjun, Muktibodh, Faiz, etc. The cozy, self-referential world of classical poetry was shattered by the seismic shocks of the 20th century. We can remember the Bengal famine, the world wars, our own freedom struggle, the unfortunate partition, and the dream of a new independent nation. This was the era of writers' movements, various writers' movements, and it lit a slow fuse that fundamentally altered the DNA of poetic performance. The shift began in the text itself. It's the pivot that changed everything. The master of this pivot, in my opinion, were Nagarjun and Faz. Look at Faz's iconic poem, Mujhse Pehli Se Mohabbat Mere Mehboob Na Maan. It starts as a personal love lament, but brilliantly and devastatingly, it turns outwards. The beloved's silk-clad body is juxtaposed with leprosy-ridden bodies rotting in ditches. The intimate too is no longer just the lover. It becomes the unfulfilled promise of a society. This is poetry as a Trojan horse. It entered the traditional mahfil, but carried a grenade of social critique. The performance of such poetry changed the relationship with the audience. It was no longer just about maza, but about diagnosis, about recognition, and about identification. When Sahib Ludhianvi declared at a mushaira, हर तरह के जज्बात का ऐलान है आंखें, शबनम कभी शोला कभी तूफान है आंखें, the wah was laced with a bitter sigh of collective trauma. The pleasure principle was being haunted by the reality principle.
Wow,
On
क्या
the-
बात है, क्या बात है. Sahir,
Thank
I'm so sorry. It's so exciting, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. I repeat it for you. हर तरह के जज्बात का
Yes,
ऐलान
please.
है आंखें, हर तरह के जज्बात का ऐलान है आंखें, शबनम कभी शोला कभी तूफान है आंखें. So I was saying that the Wah was laced with a bitter sigh of collective trauma. The pleasure principle was being haunted by a reality principle. On the Hindi front, the tradition of Kavi Sammelan was radicalized by poets like Nagarjun. He was quintessential Jan Kavi, the poet, the people's poet, who shattered the adab of the stage with his rustic, biting, and darkly humorous political satires. His performance was not melodic, it was a storm. He brought the language of the streets and the fields into the literary gathering, performing not just with his voice, but with his entire body. The poetry of Mukti Bodh, with its complex, guilt-ridden imagery, was harder to perform in a single register, but its very themes of the fractured modern self provided the intellectual ammunition for a new kind of interior confessional performance. This period cracked open the sanctified space. The poem was no longer an artifact to be admired from a distance. It was becoming a tool for awakening, for questioning, and for building a new social consciousness. All the while is still operating within the recognizable frame of the Mushaira or the Kavi Sammelan. The stage was set for the final act, the complete dissolution of the frame. And now the stage is the street. We come to the great dissolution. The Nirbhaya Andolan, India Against Corruption movements, Anna Hazare and the Indian youths at the Ramlila ground, and several other movements, the viral couplets, the Dastan Gois, slam poetry, and the spoken social media, the digital mahfils, the amnesia of context, and the poetry of dissent. So now we arrive at our contemporary times. The aesthetic, the political, and the logistical have merged to create a fundamentally new beast. The poem as a performance. The public performances of poetry in the first half of the previous decade of this century, which we have mentioned a short while ago, were not just a political encampment, they were intergenerational festivals of public poetry. The streets of the nation were a laboratory for performance. You didn't need a shama or a carpet. You needed a raised platform, a sea of smartphones, a deep simmering dissatisfaction. Consider the phenomena of as Hum Dekhenge. Now it became the undeniable anthem of 21st century Indian movements. Its performance decoupled it from the original specific context and re-encoded with the universal, almost scriptural promise of divine justice. And how can we forget those beautiful poems, motivational indeed, recited by Kumar Vishwas at the Ramlila grounds during India Against Corruption movements. So the aesthetics of this performance, this new performance, are radically different. The carefully cultivated andaz of the classical poet gives way to the raw, unpolished, deeply effective voice crack. The performance derives its power not from its adherence to meter, but from the palpable physical courage it takes to utter words of dissent. The viral smartphone clip is the new mukarrar, is a new repeat request. A powerful couplet is clipped, subtitled, and shared millions of times overnight, creating a digital mahfil that is borderless. We see a parallel in the rise of spoken word and slam poetry collectives across Indian streets. They swarm heavily influenced by global hip hop and our own oral traditions, fused with Hindi, Urdu, English, or even we can say Hinglish and Urdish kind of registers into a precursive, high energy performance of identity, gender, and politics. The poet here is a performer first, consciously using the body, breath, and the rhythm as primary instruments. This radical democratization, however, presents a Faustian bargain. Poetry in its viral performative avatar attains an incredible life-saving urgency, but it often has to sacrifice its complexity. Ambiguity, which was the soul of classical poetry, is a liability in a chant. A slogan is a blunt instrument. A share is a scalpel. We must ask ourselves, in this necessary and powerful transformation, when poetry becomes a banner, does it risk surrendering the very silence between the lines, where its most profound truths often reside? Coming to the conclusion, so as we circle back to our central question, what do we find? We find a feedback loop, a spiral, not a straight line. The street did not just kill the mahfil, it absorbed its DNA into a new body. The public performance of poetry draws its power from the centuries-old cultural memory of the Mushaira and the Kavi Sammelans, that deep-seated collective understanding that poetry carries truth and that gathering to hear poetry is a sacred, culturally significant act. The public performance gives the poem a new stage. The poem gives the public dissatisfaction a soul, a history, a voice that can travel farther than any placard. The public performance of Urdu and Hindi poetry is ultimately the story of its survival, stripped of royal patronage, challenged by new media, rattled by political upheavals. It has continuously shape-shifted. It has been a courtly entertainment, a nationalist roar, a Marxist critique, a romantic serenade, a feminist scream, and a viral tweet. The sanctified space of adab is not gone. It is being renegotiated in the real time. Every time a poem is recited at a public place, it is a daring act of trying to create a temporary sacred space of collective feeling in the heart of chaos. The role of the poet as the sensitive, unfurling antenna of the common man has only become more vital. Let us end with the sound we began with. Listen a poem closely at a public square. You will still hear the wah wah. It might be quieter. It might be a fist in the air. It might be a shared silent tear. It might be a tearful look of between strangers, but it is the same ancient human recognition of a truth, beautifully and bravely spoken into the world. Thank you so much. With this, we come to an end of this small talk. I come to two very pertinent questions that were raised by Nandini ma'am and Bhagyashree ma'am. Bhagyashree ma'am was talking about Zameen. Zameen is actually the meter, the rhyme and meter of the poetry. So the rhyme and meter in which Ghalib must have written a poem. If me and you are trying to write a poem on the same rhythm, in the same meter. That is called गालिब की जमीन में लिखा है हमने. जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल बस के दुश्वार है हर काम का आसान होना, आदमी को भी नहीं मुयस्सर हो इंसान होना. This आसान होना इंसान होना is that meter. So if we follow the same in our poem, that we can say that we are following the zameen of Ghalib. So this is what it is. Nandini ma'am was talking about code switching. Nandini ma'am, I think that I do not see much of code switching in Urdu and Hindi, because I see both these languages as very indigenous languages, and the Indian linguistic landscape is well aware about most of the Urdu words, unless and until it is highly charged, Persianized and Arabic word that is there used by the speaker in Urdu. Otherwise, the Urdu vocabulary is almost the same which we use across the Indian subcontinent. So, but yes, time and again we are using this code switching. Nandini ma'am was also asking about your suggestions regarding how we can accommodate these things in academics. So I see a great thing when Bhagyashree ma'am was talking about comparative literature. Mushairas and Kavi Sammelans can form a very good subject for comparative literature. Even how these mushairas and Kavi Sammelans are now taken the shape of, as I was talking about, digital mahfils and the viral couplets, etc. So that can be a great study. Plus, I see that if we include the study of mushairas and Kavi Sammelans in our curriculum, and make it a point that the students of Hindi University, Kolkata, must visit any Kavi Sammelan happening in Kolkata, or must visit a mushaira happening in Kolkata, write a report, do some kind of dissertation on Kavi Sammelans and mushairas that they must have watched live happening at Kolkata. So that can be a great study. And how these mushairas and Kavi Sammelans, which are basically a part of more popular poetry, but some of the time we can also find great classical poetry. For example, Bashir Badr, who died very recently, we look at him as a popular poet, yes, but we also look at him as a great poet who was deeply rooted in classics also. So I think this much is from my side. I rest my case here.
सर, आपके इस अत्यंत सारगर्भित और विचार समृद्ध व्याख्यान के लिए हार्दिक धन्यवाद। आपने साहित्य, भाषा, अनुवाद और सांस्कृतिक अध्ययन के विविध पक्षों को जिस स्पष्टता और गहराई से प्रस्तुत किया है, वो हम सभी के लिए अत्यंत उपयोगी और प्रेरणादायी रहा। अंतिम सत्र की ओर बढ़ने से पहले हमारे पास कुछ प्रश्न आए हुए हैं, उन पर हम लोग जानना चाहेंगे। सबसे पहला प्रश्न सर आपके लिए आया है। डॉक्टर विजयता दुबे हिंदी यूनिवर्सिटी की प्राध्यापिका हैं, उनकी तरफ से एक प्रश्न है। चूंकि सर अभी सभी यात्रा कर रहे हैं संभवतः अपने इंस्टीट्यूशन की ओर, तो वो लोग अभी भी जुड़े हुए हैं, लेकिन वगैरह में होंगे, इसीलिए उन्होंने लिखित तौर पर अपना प्रश्न जो है यहाँ पे साझा किया है। तो उनका प्रश्न सर से है कि क्या आधुनिक समय में कविता का स्तर बढ़ रहा है या ये केवल मनोरंजन का साधन बनकर रह गई है? सर आप
जी, मुझे लगता है कि ये सवाल पहले भी रहा होगा when poets like Ghalib and even Nagarjuna were there, तब भी ये सवाल उठता होगा कि क्या उस समय के जो लोग होंगे हमारे और आप जैसे, we must have raising this question कि क्या कविता का स्तर गिरा। देखिए, दोनों तरह की शायरी हमेशा रही है, दोनों तरह का लिटरेचर हमेशा रहा है। इन इंग्लिश लिटरेचर जब हम लोग पढ़ाते हैं क्लासरूम में, तो हम लोग पॉपुलर लिटरेचर की बात करते हैं। आजकल पॉपुलर लिटरेचर बाकायदा इट इज अ पार्ट ऑफ द करिकुलम ऑल्सो। सो इवन पॉपुलर लिटरेचर इज वन थिंग एंड वो रहेगा, हमेशा रहेगा। हम लोग गुलशन नंदा के नॉवेल्स भी पढ़ा करते थे और दूसरी तरफ हम लोग प्रेमचंद के भी नॉवेल्स पढ़ा करते थे। हम लोग जेम्स हेडले चेस के नॉवेल्स भी पढ़ा करते थे और फिर हम लोग चार्ल्स डिकेंस के नॉवेल्स भी पढ़ा करते थे। बिल्कुल वैसे ही जैसा मैंने अर्ज किया कि when we look at साहिर लुधियानवी and those popular songs that he wrote for Hindi cinema, तो आप कह सकते हैं कि वो उनकी पॉपुलर शायरी है। और फिर साहिर लुधियानवी, when we look at him as a published poet of various collections of poetry, say the greatest example is Gulzar when he's writing for Indian cinema and when he's writing for Hindi literature. We can take the example. तो मुझे लगता है सर, मेरा विचार ये है कि पॉपुलर लिटरेचर का अपना एक स्पेस है, क्लासिकल लिटरेचर का, या जिसको हमारा क्लिशेड लिटरेचर कहते हैं, स्टैंडर्ड लिटरेचर कहते हैं, कैनोनिकल लिटरेचर कहते हैं, उसका अपना एक स्पेस है। ये पहले भी था, ये हमेशा रहेगा सर। और शायरी का स्तर ये निर्भर करता है कि किस किस्म की महफिल है। अगर महफिल कोई बहुत किसी इंटीरियर में, किसी बहुत ही ऐसे जगह की जा रही है, मुशायरा फॉर एग्जांपल या कवि सम्मेलन कहीं ऐसे जगह किया जा रहा है जहाँ का श्रोता केवल टाइम पास के लिए केवल आया है, तो वहाँ की जो शायरी का स्टैंडर्ड होगा वो अलग होगा। वही शायर जब किसी इंटेलेक्चुअल्स की महफिल में, एकेडमिशियंस की महफिल में, पढ़े लिखों की महफिल में, वही सेम शायर जब अपनी शायरी सुनाता है तो उसका अप्रोच अलग होता है। तो दोनों तरह की शायरी रहेगी, दोनों तरह का लिटरेचर रहेगा, और ये हमेशा रहेगा।
जी सर, और एक प्रश्न आया है। इन सार्वजनिक मंचों ने आम बोलचाल की भाषा को समृद्ध करने में क्या योगदान दिया है? जी
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल क्या है। और मैं वही कह रहा था कि उर्दू और हिंदी का जो शब्दकोश है, लोग उर्दू में द बेसिक, अगर हम लोग लिंग्विस्टिक्स थोड़ी बहुत जानते हैं तो वी नो अबाउट द स्ट्रक्चर वर्ड्स एंड द कंटेंट वर्ड्स, है ना। तो स्ट्रक्चर वर्ड्स में हम लोग वर्ब्स को रखते हैं, और हिंदी का और उर्दू का वर्ब सेम है, पढ़ना, खाना, उठना, बैठना, लिखना, जाना, आना, गया। अंतर केवल नाउन्स के लेवल पे, एडजेक्टिव्स के लेवल पे थोड़ा बहुत होता है, राइट। हमारा जो बेसिक स्ट्रक्चरल वर्ड जिसे आप कहते हैं वो हिंदी और उर्दू का सेम है। तो मैं ये अर्ज कर रहा था कि जो आम बोलचाल की भाषा है, चाहे वो हम उर्दू बोल रहे हों, चाहे हम हिंदी बोल रहे हों, या इवन मैं तो ये मानता हूँ कि अब अंग्रेजी भी काफी हद तक हिंदुस्तानी भाषा है। वी हैव आवर ओन वेरी ओन टिपिकल इंडियन इंग्लिश। सो सर्टनली जो पब्लिक मंच है, जो सार्वजनिक मंच है, और मैं उन सार्वजनिक मंचों में अब डिजिटल मंचों को भी जोड़ लेता हूँ, टेलीफोन और स्मार्टफोन्स को भी जोड़ लेता हूँ। तो ये सारे मंच जाहिर है कि भाषा के सरलीकरण में, सिंप्लीफिकेशन में, और आम आदमी तक साहित्य को पहुंचाने में, लिटरेचर को पहुंचाने में बहुत बड़ा रोल प्ले कर रहा है। और भाषा यकीनन सिंप्लीफाई हो रही है with the help of the new media, we can say.
जी सर, बहुत बहुत आभार आपका। अब दूसरा प्रश्न है मैडम के लिए, भाग्यश्री मैम। जी, आपके लिए जो क्वेश्चन आया है अंशानी दत्ता से, मैडम प्लीज लेट अस नो इफ वी टेक हेल्प ऑफ AI like giving it information of my research to write an article, though it is original study and research, would it show AI generated?
Yes, it's a very, very important question, very important kind of urgency for the researchers. There are two things I would say. As a guide of research, I have seen many people using already AI as the content generating source, which is not proper in research, because that will be considered as an act of plagiarizing. So what you need to do is, as I said, AI is a monster, but you can use it like a genie. You have to give a very specific command. You generate an idea, and the idea concept should be yours. You can use language. You can tell AI to give the better phrase, the better expression of the same idea, and then you again polish it. It should not be used AI generated, because then human brain is not showing. So in Mumbai University, what we do as a research guide, I am told by the thesis section, I have to use plagiarism software and AI check methods. So if I find the same content in AI, I cannot give my signature granting that draft as a research. Like I said, AI has become Aladdin ka genie. So if you tell the genie to cook for you, it is not good. You have to cook for yourself. You can tell the genie only to serve in the plates. You know, it should be used like a servant, like an assistant. AI is a good assistant, but it is not a good master. So researchers have to take very, very, very good care, thoughtful care of drafting. When you are drafting on your topic, please see that the idea belongs to your analysis, to your own thinking, to your own churning of ideas in the mind. You can take the language and the format from Google, from AI, but do not ask for any content. I think this should help you in your answer. I don't know how far I'm clear to you.
जी मैम, ये तो क्लियर हो गया है जिनका भी ये प्रश्न रहा है, और मुझे लगता है कि ये काफी लोगों का इसके साथ जो है यही प्रश्न है अभी हाल ही में। तो आपका जो जवाब है उनके लिए ये मुझे भी लग रहा है कि अभी हमारे लिए ये क्लियर हो गया है। और अब हम लोग इस कार्यक्रम के समापन की ओर बढ़ते हुए मैं आज के इस महत्वपूर्ण वेबिनार में उपस्थित सभी अतिथियों, वक्ताओं, प्राध्यापकगण, शोधार्थियों और प्रतिभागियों के प्रति अपनी हार्दिक कृतज्ञता व्यक्त करना चाहूंगी। सर्वप्रथम मैं हमारी आदरणीय अध्यक्ष महोदया माननीय कुलपति प्रोफेसर नंदिनी साहू मैडम के प्रति सादर आभार व्यक्त करती हूँ, जिनके संरक्षण और मार्गदर्शन और प्रेरणादायी उपस्थिति ने इस आयोजन को विशेष गरिमा प्रदान की। मैं हमारे दोनों विशिष्ट वक्ताओं डॉक्टर भाग्यश्री एस वर्मा मैडम और डॉक्टर एस एम याहिया इब्राहिम सर के प्रति धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करती हूँ, जिनके गहन एवं विचारपूर्ण व्याख्यानों ने तुलनात्मक विश्व साहित्य के विविध आयामों को हमारे सामने अत्यंत प्रभावपूर्ण ढंग से उद्घाटित किया। मैं हिंदी विश्वविद्यालय पश्चिम बंगाल का भी हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करती हूँ, जिसके सतत सहयोग और अकादमिक वातावरण में इस प्रकार की सार्थक बौद्धिक आयोजन संभव हो पाते हैं। साथ ही मैं तकनीकी टीम और आयोजन से जुड़े सभी सहभागियों काजोरी और अमन सिंह, आप दोनों के प्रति भी धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करती हूँ, जिनके सहयोग से ये वेबिनार सफलतापूर्वक संपन्न हो सका। अंत में मैं सभी प्रतिभागियों का धन्यवाद करती हूँ कि आपने अपनी गरिमामयी उपस्थिति से इस कार्यक्रम को सफल बनाया। आशा है कि आज का ये आयोजन तुलनात्मक विश्व साहित्य के अध्ययन और चिंतन को एक नई दृष्टि प्रदान करेगा। आज के सार्थक वेबिनार का औपचारिक समापन होता है। आप सभी का हार्दिक धन्यवाद और नमस्कार।